All right, ready to dive deep into grit.
Let's do it.
We're using Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, as our main guide today.
Great choice.
By the end of this deep dive, I think you'll have a much clearer understanding of what grit is, why it's so crucial for success, and how you can start cultivating more of it in your own life.
Sounds good to me.
So what really stands out to you about grit?
You know, it's fascinating how grit often takes a backseat to talent or intelligence. We tend to put those who are naturally gifted on a pedestal.
Yeah, for sure.
But Duckworth's research really highlights how grit, that powerful combination of passion and perseverance, could actually be even more important in the long run.
Absolutely. It's like she's saying, it's not just about having the potential, it's about what you do with it.
Exactly.
And Duckworth's personal story is a great testament to that. Remember when she talks about her dad telling her she wasn't a genius?
Yes. Instead of letting that define her, she made a promise to herself and to him to be the grittiest person in the room.
Right. I love that line.
Me too.
She writes, "Dad, you say I'm no genius. I won't argue with that. You know plenty of people who are smarter than I am. But let me tell you something. I'm going to grow up to love my work as much as you love yours. I won't just have a job. I'll have a calling. I'll challenge myself every day. When I get knocked down, I'll get back up. I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I'll strive to be the grittiest."
Powerful stuff.
It's about setting an intention and choosing your own path.
Absolutely. Defining your values and committing to living by them day in and day out. That's the essence of grit.
And Duckworth didn't just stop at sharing her personal experience. She took this whole grit thing to some pretty intense places to test it out, starting with West Point, the U.S. military academy.
Yeah, West Point. That's where things get real. Known for its rigorous training, especially their summer boot camp, Beast Barracks. It's a crucible.
Yeah, a crucible where cadets are pushed to their absolute limits, both physically and mentally. So Duckworth goes in and starts measuring the cadets' grit scores. She wanted to compare these to their whole candidate scores, which take into account things like their SAT scores, leadership potential, and physical fitness.
Interesting. And what did she find?
Well, what's wild is that the grit scores were completely unrelated to those things. Whole candidate scores. It was like how talented a cadet was on paper didn't necessarily predict how they'd actually handle the pressure cooker of West Point.
Wow. So even if you're not the star student or the top performer in your field, you can still achieve incredible things through sheer grit.
Exactly.
I think that resonates with anyone who's ever felt underestimated or overlooked based on those initial impressions.
It's like saying you don't have to fit the mold to succeed.
Yeah. It reminds us that there's something deeper at play here, a kind of inner strength that those standardized tests or conventional assessments just can't measure.
Totally. And it wasn't just West Point. She saw a similar pattern in other demanding fields like sales, where facing rejection is a daily hurdle. The grittier salespeople, the ones who stuck with it even when things got tough, those are the ones who thrived.
I bet. It makes you think, have we ever noticed how passion and hard work seem to be just as crucial as raw talent in reaching our goals?
Absolutely. It's like that saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Right. I like that. Duckworth also studied the Green Berets, the elite soldiers known for their intense training. In their Special Forces selection course, where they figure out who's got what it takes to become a Green Beret, guess what was the biggest factor?
Grit.
You got it. Grit. It was a light bulb moment for her. This wasn't just a coincidence. There was a definite pattern emerging. Talent definitely matters, don't get me wrong.
For sure.
But when things get really tough, grit matters more. And she really drives this point home with the story of David, one of her 7th grade math students.
Oh yeah, David's story. It's a perfect example of how effort can often overcome those perceived limitations.
He wasn't considered a natural math whiz and had to put in more effort than some of his classmates. Initially, he wasn't even recommended for advanced math.
But he ended up becoming a rocket scientist.
I know, right? Aced advanced math, earned his PhD in mechanical engineering, and now works at the Aerospace Corporation. Talk about proving everyone wrong.
It's a real testament to the power of perseverance. It shows you that even if you don't feel naturally gifted in an area, consistent effort can lead to incredible achievements.
Couldn't agree more. David's story reminds us that the path to success isn't always a straight line.
Yeah, sometimes it's more like a winding road full of detours and unexpected turns.
Exactly. But with grit, with that persistent effort, you can navigate those twists and turns and reach your destination.
It's a good reminder that the journey itself is valuable, too.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating how Duckworth then takes us way back in time, digging up this research by Francis Galton, who debated the origins of high achievement with Charles Darwin himself.
Oh, wow, going way back.
You'd think, being a bit of a child prodigy, Galton would be all about innate talent, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd think.
But surprisingly, he wasn't. After studying the biographies of all these accomplished individuals, he found that alongside ability, zeal, and the capacity for hard labor were critical for success. Even Darwin had to admit that Galton's findings had him rethinking the importance of hard work.
That's really interesting. It really makes you think about this whole nature versus nurture debate that's been going on for centuries, right?
Right, and Duckworth delves right into it in Chapter 3. Effort counts twice. I mean, the title itself is a bit provocative, don't you think?
Definitely. It makes you stop and think.
Why do you think we put so much emphasis on natural talent?
You know, it's almost like we're looking for an excuse to avoid putting in the hard work ourselves.
I see what you mean.
It's fascinating how quick we are to label someone talented when they achieve something amazing, as if it just happened magically, you know?
Right, like they were just born with it.
Yeah, like when that radio commentator was comparing Hillary and Bill Clinton's communication styles,
Oh yeah, Bill was labeled as a natural, effortlessly charismatic.
while Hillary was portrayed as a striver.
Exactly, someone who had to work hard to get her message across.
And the implication was that Hillary could never be as good as Bill simply because she lacked that inherent gift.
It highlights this deep-seated bias we have toward those we see as naturally talented.
It's really unfortunate because it undervalues all the hard work and dedication that goes into achieving success.
And it's not just anecdotal, there's research to back this up.
Yeah.
Psychologist Chia-Jong Tse conducted studies with musicians and entrepreneurs.
What did she find?
She found that even experts, like professional musicians, displayed this naturalness bias. They consistently favored pianists who were labeled as naturals over strivers, even when their achievements and skills were identical.
Wow, even the experts. It's like this ingrained bias is deeply rooted in our perception of success.
Exactly. Even when we logically know that effort is crucial, we're still drawn to this myth of effortless talent.
And it's not just in music. SAFE found a similar bias in the business world, too. People were more likely to favor entrepreneurs labeled as naturals, even when the strivers actually had more experience and resources.
So this bias can actually hold people back because it makes them undervalue effort and dismiss hard-won successes. They might even give up too quickly when things get tough.
That's a really important point. We need to shift our focus from talent to effort.
I think Duckworth's equation sums it up perfectly. Talent x effort, skill. Skill x effort, achievement. It shows how effort acts like a multiplier.
Love that equation. It's not just about having talent. It's about using effort to develop and refine that talent, turning it into a skill.
Right. And then you take that skill and apply it with that same level of effort to achieve something truly remarkable.
So while talent might give you a head start, effort is what ultimately pushes you forward.
And that brings us to the heart of what Duckworth means by grit. Passion and perseverance for long-term goals.
It's not about just working hard for the sake of it. It's about pouring your heart and soul into something you genuinely care about. It's about sticking with it, even when the initial excitement fades.
It's about having that fire in your belly, that inner drive that keeps you going, even when you hit roadblocks, get bored, or feel like giving up.
And that's where those two key elements of grit come in: passion and perseverance.
We often think of passion as this intense, overwhelming emotion. But Duckworth sees it a little differently. She argues that passion is more about a consistent interest over time. It's a deep-seated fascination that keeps you engaged even when the thrill wears off.
It's less about fireworks and more about a slow, steady burn.
Right. She uses the example of Jeffrey Gettleman, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who dreamt of being a foreign correspondent since he was a kid. His journey wasn't easy or quick. It took him over a decade of rejections, detours, and working his way up through different news outlets.
Yeah, he wasn't an overnight success. It was that unwavering dedication to his goal that got him there. Each step he took was a deliberate move towards his dream, showing that passion isn't always this straight, clear path.
I like how you put that. It's about navigating those unexpected twists and turns and staying committed to the journey.
Absolutely. It's like passion gives you the map, and perseverance is what keeps your feet moving, even when you hit those roadblocks.
And that's where perseverance, the second element of grit, comes in. It's about staying the course, weathering the storms, and getting back up when you fall. Knowing that setbacks are inevitable, but they don't have to stop you. Makes you wonder, how does grit develop? Are we born with it, or can we nurture it? And how much do things like parenting and the culture we're surrounded by play a role in shaping our grit?
Great questions. Duckworth explores all of that, delving into how our environment, especially parenting and culture, impacts grit development. That's what we'll be looking at next.
Awesome. Should we all be striving to be drill sergeant parents or free-spirited cheerleaders, or is there a better way?
Let's find out. We'll explore how different parenting styles and cultural influences can shape grit and what we can learn from that. It's like this whole debate about the right way to raise gritty kids. Should we be those tough love drill sergeant types? Or are we supposed to be those super supportive, follow your bliss cheerleaders?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Duckworth digs into this question, exploring all these different parenting styles and how they impact grit development.
Right.
She even shares these contrasting stories about two successful people, Steve Young, the Hall of Fame quarterback, and Francesca Martinez, a comedian.
Yeah, those stories really stuck with me. Young's dad had that tough love approach.
Pushing him hard, even when he wanted to quit, instilled this idea that giving up wasn't an option.
Yeah, like no matter what, you keep going.
Exactly. Then you have Martinez, whose parents were all about encouragement, always telling her to follow her dreams.
Yeah, they supported her decision to drop out of school to pursue acting.
Even though that might have seemed a little unconventional.
Totally. So two very different approaches, but both led to success.
And both of them, I'd say, demonstrated a lot of grit.
It makes you think maybe there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to raising gritty kids.
Yeah, precisely. What's interesting is how both Young and Martinez achieved incredible things and showed grit in their own unique ways.
Right. It suggests that there isn't just one magic formula for parenting, for grit.
Exactly.
Duckworth talks about this idea of wise parenting, which seems like a good middle ground between those two extremes. What does she mean by wise parenting exactly?
Well, wise parenting is about finding that sweet spot.
The sweet spot.
Yeah, between support and challenge.
Got it.
It's like being a coach. You encourage, set high expectations, and help your child learn from their mistakes.
So not being too strict or too lenient.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where children feel loved and respected while also being pushed to step outside their comfort zones.
I like that. Setting those high expectations, but giving them the tools and support they need to reach them.
Exactly. Creating that environment where they feel empowered to tackle challenges.
And to learn from their setbacks.
Definitely.
Duckworth even gives parents a checklist to assess their own style, based on research by psychologist Nancy Darling. It covers things like warmth, respect, and structure.
It's really helpful for taking a look at your own approach. It asks questions like, do I provide consistent support but not remove all obstacles? Do I model a growth mindset myself and show a passion for things I'm pursuing? Do I create opportunities for my children to struggle productively?
Those are great questions for parents to think about.
Absolutely. It's not just about telling your kids to work hard. It's about building that environment where they can actually cultivate that gritty mindset.
And speaking of environment, parenting isn't the only thing that shapes grit.
Right. Duckworth also explores how powerful culture is in shaping grit.
Because it's not just our family, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole world around us that influences who we become.
Yeah, for sure. The culture we're a part of shapes our values, beliefs, and ultimately our behavior.
You know, her discussion about West Point was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a unique environment. The culture there is so specific.
Totally. West Point's a great example of how a culture can intentionally foster grit.
Right. There's such an intense focus on those shared values like duty, honor, and resilience.
It's everywhere, in everything they do.
And one key principle that Duckworth highlights is this idea of leading from the front.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
It's not about barking orders from a distance. It's about those in leadership positions getting in the trenches, showing those values in action.
Right. Leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates this sense of camaraderie of being in it together, which can really motivate people to push through challenges.
Like this collective grit that emerges from a shared purpose and values.
Exactly. And it's not just military environments.
Right.
Duckworth sees the same kind of leadership in the business world, too. She talks about Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase.
Oh, yeah, Diamond.
He's a lot like the leaders at West Point. He emphasizes values like resilience, tenacity, and this drive for excellence.
Yeah, he sets those high standards and holds people accountable.
Definitely. Creating a culture where grit is expected.
Not just encouraged, but expected. That's a big difference.
Totally.
And then there's Anson Dorrance, the legendary coach of the UNC women's soccer team.
Oh, he's incredible.
He's built this competitive cauldron, as he calls it, to cultivate grit within his team.
Love that.
Yeah.
Competitive cauldron.
His coaching philosophy revolves around 12 core values, with half focused on teamwork and the other half on individual grit.
It's that combination, he believes, that creates this powerful environment where players are challenged and supported.
Yeah, pushing themselves to their limits, but also feeling that sense of responsibility to the team.
Exactly. It's that balance of individual drive and collective support.
And speaking of competitive cauldrons, Duckworth talks about Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He seems to have this knack for building a culture of grit within his team.
Oh, yeah. Carroll's all about that championship mindset. Competition, resilience, believing you can overcome any obstacle.
And he actually incorporates those things into their practice, like Competition Wednesdays.
Where they do these really intense drills simulating game day pressure.
It's not just about going through the motions, it's about pushing their limits.
Building that resilience. Developing that unshakable belief in themselves and the team.
So whether it's West Point, JP Morgan Chase, or the Seattle Seahawks, there's this consistent thread of leadership shaping grit. But it's not just about those leaders at the top, right? There's peer influence, too.
Oh, absolutely. Duckworth mentions sociologist Dan Chambliss, who talks about two paths to developing grit, the hard way and the easy way.
The hard way and the easy way.
Yeah, the hard way is going it alone, relying only on your own willpower. The easy way is surrounding yourself with people who already embody grit.
So it's about being intentional about the company you keep.
Right. If you're always around people who embody grit, you're more likely to start acting that way too.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. It goes back to that idea of conformity. We're social creatures. We tend to align ourselves with the norms and values of our group.
If grit is the norm, you're more likely to pick it up.
Totally. It's like osmosis for grit.
I love that. But Duckworth also cautions against just blindly following any group. It's about finding the right group.
Yeah. The one that really aligns with your values and aspirations.
So surrounding yourself with people who inspire you to be your best self, challenge you to grow, and support you when you stumble.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens.
So we've talked about the influence of parents and the power of culture. But what about the role of individual effort? Duckworth also dives into this idea of deliberate practice as a key ingredient for developing both skill and grit.
Right. It's not just about putting in the time. It's about how you use that time.
Duckworth actually shares a funny story about herself and running. She'd been jogging for years, but wasn't getting any faster.
Yeah, and she talks to Anders Ericsson, who's known for his research on deliberate practice.
And he points out that she's not actually doing deliberate practice.
Because she's not pushing herself or seeking feedback to improve.
She's just going through the motions.
Exactly.
No clear goal or plan for improvement.
Yeah.
It highlights this idea that just clocking in the hours isn't enough.
It's about intentionally using those hours to get better.
Duckworth also mentions this concept of flow, that state of being totally absorbed in an activity.
Where you lose track of time.
You're in that sweet spot where your skills perfectly match the challenge.
Yeah, flow is often seen as this super enjoyable and rewarding state.
But Duckworth points out that it's not the same as deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice isn't always about feeling good while you're doing it.
It's about pushing beyond your comfort zone, which can involve discomfort,
Yeah.
frustration, even struggle. It's like those elite athletes who train in solitude, pushing their limits, even when it's not fun.
It's about embracing the challenge, knowing that discomfort is how you grow.
I love that. Deliberate practice is the hard work that gets you to the party, and flow is the reward for showing up.
Exactly. Great analogy. Duckworth also emphasizes the importance of purpose in fueling grit.
Right, connecting your work to something bigger than yourself, finding that why, that keeps you going.
She calls it having a calling, where work becomes more than just a job.
It's part of who you are, a way to contribute to something meaningful.
Exactly. She tells this story about Joe Leader, the lead engineer for the New York City subway system.
Oh yeah, Joe. Initially, he just needed to pay off his student loans.
Right, but then it turned into a calling for him.
He started seeing his work as more than just fixing trains. It was about keeping millions of people safe.
Connecting communities, making a real impact on the city.
It's like that realization that finding your purpose isn't always this huge aha moment.
Sometimes it's more gradual.
It's about connecting what you're good at with what you care about.
Right. And purpose doesn't have to be this grand altruistic thing.
You can be about finding meaning in the everyday.
Exactly. Like that bricklayer realizing he's not just laying bricks, he's building a cathedral.
It's about finding that connection, that spark of purpose that makes your work more than just a way to make a living.
Absolutely. But how do we keep that spark alive when things get tough?
Yeah, because setbacks are a part of life. How do we bounce back and stay the course?
Duckworth also talks about hope, which is crucial for resilience. She shares some research on learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
It's this phenomenon where, after experiencing uncontrollable adversity over and over again, people just give up.
It's like they learn to be helpless.
Exactly. She talks about this classic experiment with dogs who were given random electric shocks.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Some of them could stop the shocks by pressing a lever, but the others had no control. And eventually, the dogs who couldn't control the shocks just gave up, even when they were given a way to escape later.
That's so sad. It's like they lost all hope.
But here's the thing. There's also something called learned optimism.
So there's a flip side.
Yes. Duckworth talks about Martin Seligman, a psychologist who studied the dogs who didn't give up.
The resilient ones.
Right. He found that these optimistic dogs, even after being shocked, were still able to bounce back. They didn't lose hope.
So what's the difference between those who learn helplessness and those who learn optimism?
Well, Seligman found that it's about how we interpret negative events. Optimists tend to view setbacks as temporary and specific, while pessimists see them as permanent and pervasive.
So instead of saying, I'm a failure, I'll never be good at this, an optimist might say, okay, that didn't work out, but what can I learn from it?
Exactly. It's about believing that things can and will get better, that you have the power to influence things, to learn, adapt, grow.
And that ties back to the growth mindset. When you believe you can get better, that your abilities aren't fixed, you're more likely to face challenges with hope and resilience.
Absolutely. And Duckworth gives some practical tips for cultivating hope. One that really stood out to me was focusing on what you can control.
Yeah, I like that one.
It's about shifting your focus away from the things you can't control and focusing on where you can make a difference. Even if it's something small, it's about taking action, even baby steps towards your goals.
It's about feeling empowered, not powerless.
Exactly. And she also talks about building a supportive network.
Friends, family, mentors, colleagues,
People who believe in you and offer encouragement.
especially when you're feeling down.
Exactly. Having those people around can make a huge difference in boosting your hope and reminding you that you're not alone.
It's about the power of human connection.
Definitely. We're social creatures, and our connections can be so strengthening.
Duckworth also talks about the power of positive self-talk.
Oh yeah, that inner voice.
It's about challenging those negative thoughts,
Replacing them with more empowering ones.
becoming your own cheerleader.
Right. Reminding yourself of your strengths, your past successes, and your ability to overcome obstacles. It's about that voice inside you that says, you got this, even when things are tough.
So, while Duckworth is all about grit, she also acknowledges it's not the only thing we need for a fulfilling life.
Exactly.
She even poses this interesting question. Is grit always a good thing?
It makes you think, right? We always hear never give up, but are there times when it's actually wiser to reevaluate, to pivot?
Or even to walk away from something that's no longer serving you?
Right. She uses this analogy of a musician who spent years practicing piano and French horn, but then discovered a passion for the cello.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
And by letting go of those other instruments, she was able to really embrace this new passion.
And she excelled in a way she might not have if she'd kept stubbornly clinging to those earlier goals.
It's a great reminder that grit isn't about sticking with absolutely everything you start, no matter what.
It's about knowing when to persevere, but also when to let go.
It's about that balance between passion and flexibility, between commitment and adaptability.
Duckworth also reminds us that grit is just one piece of the character puzzle.
Right. She talks about these three groups of virtues: intrapersonal, interpersonal, and intellectual.
Strengths of will, heart, and mind.
Yes. And grit falls under strengths of will, along with things like self-control and perseverance.
Then you have strengths of heart, which include qualities like empathy, kindness, and social intelligence.
And strengths of mind, like curiosity, intellectual humility, and a love of learning. It highlights how a truly fulfilling life needs a variety of character strengths.
It's not just about grit alone. It's about the whole package. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into grit. What are the big takeaways for our listeners? How can they apply these insights to their own lives?
I think the most important takeaway is that grit can be cultivated. It's not something you're born with or you're not.
It's something you can develop.
Yes, through intentional effort, consistent practice, and the right environment.
Duckworth encourages us to explore our interests, to really dig into those things that spark our curiosity and passion.
Setting clear goals, breaking them down into smaller steps, and committing to a consistent routine.
And remembering that setbacks are inevitable.
But they don't have to define us.
It's about developing that resilient mindset, learning from your mistakes, and coming back stronger. And, of course, finding your purpose, connecting your work to something meaningful, something that fuels your passion.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into grit, we'll leave you with something to ponder. Duckworth ends her book with a story about Ta-Nehisi Coates, the writer.
Oh yeah, Coates. He's known for his powerful writing on race and social justice.
He believes that writing is all about embracing failure.
Trying, failing, and trying again.
He even shares an anecdote about wanting to quit writing altogether and become a cab driver.
Really? Wow. It's powerful to remember that even those who have achieved great things still have moments of doubt.
And setbacks and the urge to give up.
It's that willingness to keep going even when it's tough that often separates those who reach their goals from those who don't.
It's about believing in yourself, trusting that you can overcome obstacles.
So as you continue on your journey, remember to embrace the challenges, learn from your mistakes, and never underestimate the power of grit.
And remember, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to achieve great things. Sometimes it's about being the grittiest.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Even those who seem to have it all figured out still go through those same struggles.
It's human nature.
It's reassuring in a way. Knowing those feelings of self-doubt and facing setbacks, it's all part of the process.
Yeah, it's not about avoiding them, it's about how you handle them.
Exactly. Do those feelings hold you back, or do they fuel your drive to keep moving forward?
That's the key. So as you go after your own goals, remember you're not alone in feeling unsure sometimes.
It's those who push through those tough moments, those are the ones who achieve their dreams.
Yeah, it's like having that inner compass that guides you even when the path gets rocky.
And remember those groups of virtues we talked about earlier. Strengths of will, heart, and mind. Grit is a big one, but it's not the whole story.
Right, there's more to it.
Cultivating empathy, kindness, curiosity, a love of learning, those are all important too.
It's about recognizing that true success has many sides.
It's not just those external achievements. It's about developing those inner strengths that allow us to live a truly fulfilling life in all areas, both personally and professionally.
Well said.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into grit, here's what we want you to take away. Grit is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's not about forcing yourself or pushing until you burn out.
Yeah, it shouldn't feel like a constant uphill battle.
It's about finding that sustainable passion, that drive that keeps you going over the long haul.
It's having that fire, but also knowing when to rest, recharge, and reassess.
Finding that balance between pushing yourself and taking care of yourself.
Exactly.
Think about your own goals and dreams. What are those things that truly excite you?
The things that make you want to jump out of bed in the morning.
How can you connect with that passion and use it to fuel your perseverance?
Remember, building grit is a journey, not a destination.
There will be ups and downs, moments of triumph, and moments of doubt.
But if you embrace the challenge, learn from every experience, and surround yourself with the right people,
You can develop that unshakable strength that will help you achieve anything you set your mind to.
couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep cultivating that fire within you.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.